A really good question to ask yourself is, can I predict my behavior when I drink?
Is that me? And why am I doing that? And why did I behave in that way?
If you're thinking like, do I have a problem with alcohol? You likely have a problem, because like non-problem drinkers don't ask that question. It's just nothing that would ever occur to them. If they're pressuring you to drink, that is also an indication that they likely have a problem with alcohol. How is that creating bonding as well, if kind of the only bonding is like under the guise of liquor?
The way people behave and act and accidents and everything. If you're at a company event, you're responsible for, your employees' safety.
And we're all quite complex creatures. And I think like we all have internal worlds inside of us that the behavior, once you understand why that part of you is doing, like the behavior starts to make sense.
Welcome back to The Upward Spiral, a podcast where we explore the transformative power of intentional living, starting with rethinking your relationship with alcohol. I'm your host, Michelle O'Brien, and I'm thrilled to guide you on this journey of self-discovery and personal growth. So in today's episode, we're diving deep into a topic that's especially relevant as we head into the holidays: navigating the festive season and the new year with clarity, purpose, and intention. So my own journey started a couple of years ago when I decided to explore an alcohol-free life. What I discovered was a profound sense of freedom, clarity, and energy that allowed me to unlock my potential. I wasn't expecting it, and it completely transform my life. And that's what I'm really passionate about sharing with you. So now let me introduce you to an amazing guest today. She's a former LinkedIn leader who spearheaded a movement to create a more inclusive workplace culture. She's a certified coach who helps high-performing executives achieve their biggest dreams without burning out. And she's the host of the Big Fucking Dream podcast. With her radiant smile, infectious energy, and incredible achievements, please, can I welcome the amazing Hannah Kissel. Hannah, I'm really excited to have you on the show today. I know that our listeners are going to be blown away by all the amazing insights that you've got to share. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm like, let's hope so. Let's hope that they're blown away. But yeah, it's great to be here. I'm a fan of the podcast. Always love talking about the intersection of sobriety and workplace culture. I think it's a really interesting concept that's not necessarily explored as much as it could be or should be. So I'm so pumped to be here with you today and with your audience.
Thank you so much. You know what? Let's just kind of get into it. I'd love to hear a little bit about your origin story. Maybe kind of a little bit about your own journey to sobriety and what was your kind of aha moment, your catalyst for change.
Yeah. Well, God, like, how dark do we want to get here? Had quite a few aha moments. I've been sober for over 7 years. I'm coming up to 8 years next year. I can think of quite a few moments, but there was one. It was a workplace event actually, where I got really blacked out. I said some things to a manager. I got called into HR and had to basically sign a form. Like, it was like I had to get like a written violation saying that I was incoherent at a company party. It was this boat party. I remember walking into my therapist's office, that was shortly after, and I just said, "Do you think that I have a problem with alcohol?" And she said, "People that don't have a problem with alcohol don't ask that question." And that was such an aha moment for me. If you're thinking like, do I have a problem with alcohol? You likely have a problem, because like non-problem drinkers don't ask that question. It's just nothing that would ever occur to them. So that was a huge catalyst and a huge aha moment where I thought, okay, this is starting to impact my professional career. I mean, I probably didn't get sober until 6 or 8 months later. And another dark moment, another dark night of the soul. And I just thought, there's so many things I want to achieve in life. And I have so many aspirations. I have so many ambitions. And my family history is just littered with alcoholism. It's like every other person was like knocked down the addiction tree. And it was just looking at my family history. At that point, I was 27 and thinking, this is either going to go one of two ways. If I don't stop drinking now, it's probably not going to be pretty. More and more things are going to start happening to me. And I know that there is this other vibrant, creative life waiting for me. if I don't drink. So essentially I can have alcohol or I can have everything else. And that was the moment where I decided to completely give it up. It was the best thing that I've ever done in my entire life, for my relationships, for my career, for my health. And I've never for a single day looked back and thought like, I wish I still drank. If anything, now that when I see people that are struggling, and a lot of people struggle with alcoholism, or just they might not identify it as alcoholism, but they might make choices that they really regret or feel deeply shameful about. And whenever I see that happening, all I think is like, oh my God, that could have been me. That was me. Like there's a real connection there and a compassion and a deep empathy. And then also just like, I'm so happy that I chose my life instead of choosing alcohol instead, that I chose like vibrancy and growth and personal development and, you know, my hopes and my dreams, not like being alcohol, which was just slowly degrading and eroding my soul. So it's kind of an intense answer, but that's the truth.
How old were you at the time?
Yeah, I stopped drinking the day after my 27th birthday.
And would you say like culturally or like by society standards, you were drinking like a normal amount?
I'm an expat. I'm from LA. I live in Australia. A lot of my friends were really shocked. They were like, nothing's really wrong here. You just party like as much as the rest of us. But alcohol impacts me different. Like I would go into depressive episodes. I would say like, yeah, you're fine the next day, but I have like suicidal ideation. Like this is, for me, it impacts me differently. So I wouldn't say that like I never drank on my own. I didn't drink on my own. Like I could have 2 glasses of wine out to dinner with friends and stop. Like I didn't have an alcohol dependency. And I think that is a real barrier for people to stop drinking, is because they might think, I don't drink every day. I don't drink on my own. But basically, a really good question to ask yourself is, can I predict my behavior when I drink? Can I safely predict it? Do I know what I'm going to do? Or if you're listening to this and thinking, I can't predict my behavior when I drink. Like I have no idea what's going to happen when I drink. Sometimes it's okay. Other times I'm like shouting at someone, causing fights with my partner, saying things that I regret, saying things that are inappropriate, harassing people. I mean, the list goes on, making really bad decisions. Then there's probably an issue with alcohol. But I would say that no, a lot of my friends were really shocked. Like it wasn't like everyone was sitting there. Like I didn't have an intervention or anything. But I knew, especially because I'm from LA, which is a huge 12-step culture. A lot of people are in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like it was very normalized for me growing up that I knew that there was another path. But it's the thought that it's not that bad, so I'm not going to give up. I think that hinders a lot of people, where it's like your life could be so much better if you gave this up, but you think it's not that bad by society standards, that you're okay. So yeah, it wasn't like, a lot of people wouldn't have said it was that bad, but I knew internally that my life wasn't what it could be.
God, it's like, it's just like the exact same. For me, I was kind of a bit later than you. You know, at 27, I was still drinking, going out a lot, drinking heavily with friends, but yeah, would frequently kind of get blackout drunk, not know how I got home, lose stuff. Yeah, it just, and would be vomiting a lot as well. Like my body would actually kind of like realize I'm actually quite a small person. So like my body would be expelling the alcohol, like it, you know, the poison, for lack of a better word. And it, you know, and I would I carry quite a lot of shame for like how I behaved when I was drunk, and, you know, really question like, you know, is that me? And why am I doing that? And why did I behave in that way? But it took a long time. It took a long time of like winding, and I very gradually like drank less and less. And so much of it was just because by society standards, I wasn't an alcoholic. I didn't have alcohol dependency. I wasn't drinking on my own. I, you know, was able to kind of get up and go to work to, you know, the next day. And I think just reframing that is like, you don't have to be at that absolute extreme, but it wasn't good for me. And yeah, I cannot tell you like how my life has changed since giving up the very little that I was drinking in the end.
Yeah. And we like in, in 12 step in Alcoholics Anonymous, you can call it like a high bottom drunk or a low bottom drunk. And basically, I think it's a really big disservice because a lot of what people identify alcoholism with, and whether we say alcoholism, I use the term alcoholism, whether it be alcohol dependency disorder or problem drinking, or I'm kind of using alcoholism as a catch-all phrase right now because that's what I prescribe to, and I do the 12 steps, and I'm very active in 12 step recovery process. But when we talk about like high bottom or low bottom, like high bottom is like you still have your job, you still have relationships, you're still functioning, you still could be making 200, 300, 400, 500K. Like you're kind of like, it's not that bad because I still have all these things. Whereas a low bottom drunk could be, or low bottom, bottoming out could be you lose your job, you lose your family, maybe you're drinking every day, maybe you have like alcohol dependency where you're shaking if you don't drink. And that's really what people identify problem drinkers with. And it's a huge disservice because actually you could quit when you are kind of higher. But I think if there is a difference between problem drinking and true alcoholism. Like with alcoholism, it is going to it's progressive. It will just continue to get worse. In 12 step, we call it the yets. Like you haven't been fired yet. You haven't lost your relationship yet. You haven't been incarcerated yet. But these things, if you are, a true quote unquote alcoholic, whatever that could mean to you, it likely will happen. So this is just kind of a note of like, if you are considering, should I stop drinking or not? And it's because of shame. Like if it's because of shame, like that's a really big clue and hint that there's something deeper going on inside you where a part of you really knows that this isn't the right path for you.
And so like, let's just talk a little bit. Were you working at LinkedIn at the time?
When I stopped drinking? Yeah. I was working at LinkedIn, and how long had I been at LinkedIn? Maybe like 3 years, 4 years by that time. Cause I stopped in 2017. Maybe it was 2 years actually. Yeah. And then I had like a pretty big career at LinkedIn, like then went on to lead a sales team, hired my sales team. Like no one had ever seen me drink. So by that time there had kind of been natural attrition in the organization where then I was, a lot of people had never seen me drink.
Yeah. Which is great. And so you were instrumental in creating a more inclusive culture at LinkedIn. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe instrumental is like is a big word, but I think it was interesting. So when I stopped drinking, and actually, this poor guy, this HR manager who didn't go on to be my HR business partner when I was a leader, but the guy that I just signed the HR policy with, saying that I was like blackout drunk, probably a year later, I was in his office and I said, I've just gone to a team offsite. I'm newly sober. You know that clearly I've had issues with alcohol in the past. And this team offsite was at a bar. Like it was at a pub. Like, what do you expect me to do? Like, this isn't, and I was like crying because it was like, this isn't inclusive. We talk about inclusivity. If we look at the population in Australia, 8% of people have an issue with alcohol, whether that's identify as an alcoholic or identify as like alcohol use disorder or something like that. So if we look at the statistics, 1 in every person on a team will have an issue. Yet so many of the events in our workplace revolve around alcohol, and it's the only option. So then a policy was then enacted where in Australia, like if there was a team event, one part of the team event had to not involve alcohol. So whether that be, I don't know, like a paint, like I was just going to say like a wine and paint class. Like, maybe there's an option for no wine. Or we did like axe throwing, or we did like different types of team events. But my manager then went in and he spoke to the leadership. I wasn't in leadership then, but he spoke to leadership about my experience, about why this policy was so instrumental. And he was really supportive in that as well, which was great. He went to speak to the whole leadership team about my experience, about the, how we need to look after the workforce and looking at like, what does DEI mean in terms of inclusivity around alcohol? How are we being more inclusive to the people who don't want to drink? But then this is also for different reasons. Like you could be pregnant. You could just not, there was another woman on my team who just had never drank alcohol. And that was, that was not because she had a problem with alcohol. That was just her own choice. And so it's really about creating, like, I think that made a more inclusive environment and actually had people look at what are the repercussions of only having team offsites or only having team events at pubs? What is that saying about us? What type of culture do we want to foster? Also, how is that creating bonding as well? If kind of the only bonding is like under the guise of liquor.
Yeah. And it's a safety thing as well, right? The way people behave and, and act and accidents and everything. If you're at a company event, you're responsible for, your employees' safety.
Yeah. And this is, there's, we see this as well. Like, I have a history of working in tech. I work with a lot of clients that work in tech, but these giant tech conferences where they'll be in Vegas for 3 days, and likely Vegas is one of the only options that can house 10,000 people. So there are reasons for that. But these companies and the employees, especially if they're employees that have a higher risk of, and maybe do have problems with drinking, and they do get in that type of environment. I've seen this time and time and time again, where then people come back after these conferences, and me myself, like, I've had some very low moments in these conferences in Vegas where I wish I had got sober quicker. I wish I had got sober sooner so that none of this, what I did at those places wouldn't have happened. But, things played out the way that they did. But it's looking at, okay, if you are going to have these types of conferences, like, what precautions are you taking? What are you doing? And also, everyone is responsible for themselves. Like, everyone has to be an adult as well. So there is kind of the onus on the responsibility of the company, but then there's also self-responsibility. And if you are going to, let's say, Vegas for 3 days and you have a problem with alcohol, or even you have a problem with drugs, and that, looking at what's going to be the best thing. Is it fully abstaining? Is it, only, I feel like I don't necessarily want to give tactics and strategies, but is it like you don't drink hard liquor? Is it that you stop drinking at a certain point? Like, if there is any doubt, first of all, if there's any doubt, then that means that there's likely a deeper issue with alcohol. Like, people that don't have an issue with alcohol don't really try to curb their drinking. So I will say that. But then secondly, if you have an issue and you don't want to fully stop drinking, then making a game plan for these types of events as well.
And have you seen like these events change over maybe the last 7-8 years? Less drinking, more inclusive activities. Is that happening?
I would say across different tech companies, definitely. There's different types of events. I think companies are being more aware. Like, there's more conversation around alcoholism, especially in Australia. I think Australia is there's a very big normalized drinking culture here, probably more than in the US. And it is starting to change, but then also there are still these big conferences. And it's kind of like you can only do so much groundwork here, but you get 8,000 people in a sales force in Vegas of highly extroverted, trained salespeople. Things are going to happen. And there's only so much that the company can do at that point. At that point, like, while it is up to the company, like the responsibility also has to be on the individual as well. So there has to be a mutual ownership that's going on.
Yeah, for sure. And at LinkedIn, what type of events did you put together or do that were alcohol free?
Yeah, we did. For my team, we did like a sunrise kayaking. We did axe throwing. The woman that threw the axe, she said she had never seen someone so bad as me. She was like, I just like couldn't get the axe anywhere near the board. She was like, I've never seen this before. Like, you're actually so terrible. And I was like, yeah, I know, I have no coordination. We did some like painting activities for my team. Also, like, this was an indication that I was going to go into coaching. We did like a dream day where it was like, okay, we spent like a full day developing our dreams and making action plans of how to do that, both inside and outside of work. But I've seen different types of activities. And I think now that really started the conversation of, what can we do that's a little bit out of the box that's going to bring people together? Also, like, it depends on the age of a sales force as well, but is the company hiring mostly people straight out of college, or is the company, like, is the sales force in their mid-30s? I think that when I was first at LinkedIn, when the company was 3,000 people, like, it was a younger workforce. Now the workforce has matured. They, like in Australia, there's no sales development team anymore. Like sales development representatives are typically, fresh out of school, fresh out of college. It's their first entry into the sales force. So if you don't have that type of environment, then as the workforce matures, hopefully you would think that the desire to drink, to really get loaded at company parties, like that starts to dissolve, where people have families, they want different things from the workforce rather than just going to a pub.
Yeah, I think that's interesting though as well. Like we're seeing Gen Z not drink as much and choosing to go alcohol free and everything else. So I think that would also change as well as it's changing with the next generation. Let's talk a little bit about the holidays, because the holidays is just a really difficult time when you're alcohol free. Have you got any tips for attending office parties and, how to kind of navigate that if you are, trying to drink less or, not drink at all?
If this is your first time attending a party where you're not drinking, I don't know, this is kind of like a little bit of a weird tip, but I would say like my tip is sugar. And like, I don't drink any, like I don't actually eat processed sugar at all anymore. I had to give that up. But if this is your first time, just know that you might feel a little bit shaky. And I would say, like, first of all, always have a drink in your hand, whether that be a soda water, whether that be a Coca-Cola, whether that be lemon, lime, and bitters, whatever it is, but always having a drink in your hand so that you feel like you're drinking. Also, that people don't offer you drinks, because when you have a drink in your hand and it's full, less people are going to offer. Another tip is, I would just like, what I did, when I was newly sober, I just drank a lot of Coke. I ended up being like totally like buzzed off the wall. And I feel like this is, one of my first sponsors in AA. She was like, when I first stopped drinking, she was like, do you smoke cigarettes? And I was like, yeah, occasionally. She was like, okay, keep smoking. Like, do you eat sugar? Like, keep eating sugar. Like, don't give up anything else. Like, only go into the party thinking like, I just have to leave the party not drinking tonight. So I feel like this is, it's a little bit like, this isn't like health coach Hannah. This is like, all right, let's just get you through it. But having Coke, having a fun drink, like having something that you like to drink, that's fun, that you feel like you can get a little bit of a buzz off, whether that's sugar or maybe you don't drink sugar, maybe you just want like sparkling water. Another tip is actually no one cares. And like a lot of people think that everyone will notice that they're not drinking. No one really cares. And if you're kind of a problem drinker, typically what happens as well is you go to these parties and you realize that people aren't really getting off their face, that maybe you were the only one off your face. I remember saying to a therapist years ago, I was like, yeah, everyone's just like blacked out at these company parties. And she was like, not everyone is, but you are. And I was like, oh. And then like going to parties sober, I was like, wow, not everyone's as drunk as I thought they were. Like it was really just me. And like, who I was hanging out with, like me and my homies were really the drunk ones. So just realizing that not a lot of people are drinking to the level that maybe you had been, and that's totally fine. But also no one really cares. And if someone starts to ask a lot of questions, if they seem really intrigued, if they're pressuring you to drink, that is also an indication that they likely have a problem with alcohol. And what I've noticed over the years is the only people that have really cared that I don't drink are the people that I have thought have questionable drinking patterns, that they somehow feel like it's an affront on them or an attack on them or a commentary on how much they're drinking, or they're just like, come on, but we used to have so much fun. And then it starts to also stress test, who are the relationships that you really want to stay in your life? Like, who are the relationships that really have your best intentions at heart? Because if they want to drink, and if you say like, actually, I'm just like giving it up or something like that, and they don't support you, then that's a real indication of like their true care about you. But another thing is that you don't have to say, especially the thought of giving up drinking for a long period of time can be quite daunting. So you don't need to say like, I'm fully off alcohol. You can just say like, oh, I'm not drinking for a month, or oh, I'm not drinking for a week, or I'm taking a few weeks off. Like it doesn't need to be this big declaration. And in fact, I probably wouldn't make a big declaration, because then if you do drink again or you slip up, there can be some sort of shame associated with that or guilt associated with that. So I would just keep it really simple. So in summary, like have some sugar, have a drink in your hand. Don't really tell people that you're not drinking. Maybe if you want to tell like one or two close friends or support people, like your bestie at the company, like, hey, I'm not doing this. I would love your support tonight. But you don't need to make a big deal out of it. And then anyone that does, just kind of clock it and say, okay, they might have an issue with drinking, and that's okay. And you're not there to judge them or start preaching the impacts of sobriety when you haven't drank for like only 1 week. Like, you don't need to do any of that. You just can kind of walk away.
A couple of things for me as well. Wear comfy shoes. So if you're a woman and you're listening to this, don't go out in your high heels because your feet will just hurt. And that's all you'll think about. You'll just be miserable because your feet hurt. Lean in to like the non-alcs. So if they do have alcohol-free alternatives, great. You know, you use those because that in itself will kind of act as a placebo, make you feel included. And if you've got a non-alcoholic wine in your hand or a cocktail, you'll get less questions about whether you are or aren't drinking. If you feel like you need to be armed with an excuse, get an excuse, you know, figure that, you know, come armed with an excuse if you feel like you need it. And like lean into any of the non-alcoholic like experiences that there might be. So if, you know, if there's a cocktail making class, you know, lean into kind of the non-alc, you know, let's make a mocktail instead of a cocktail. If it, you know, if there is like activities that are happening, I don't know. I keep thinking of face painting, but I think that's just because I've been to so many kids' parties recently. But whatever it is, right? You know, they might have something going on. You know, lean into the activities. Enjoy the music as well, and you know, just have a game plan for how to get home as well. Like when you've had enough, just ghost. Like it's totally fine to ghost. Just, you know, when it's time to go home, just go home. Don't stress about having to stay there long past your capacity too.
Those are so good. Yeah, especially like having an excuse ready where you could say like, oh, I'm training for something, or I'm doing dry December, or me and my friend made a pact that we wouldn't drink. I think having that ready one is like absolutely crucial. And also if it's a bit different if it's a company party, but if it's just a gathering, another thing is like, how can you help in a certain way? Like, how can you, if it's like a family gathering or a friends gathering, like, can you like be making a cheese board during the time? Like, is there something you can do? Like you said, getting involved in an activity, but how can you help either set up or put down or help the host? Or if you're hosting, like, can you be cooking or something like that? Is there something you can be doing with your hands so you stay busy, so you're not just thinking, okay, I want to drink? Like, what can occupy your time, and how can you also be of service and be helping at the party?
Yeah, definitely. And like the holidays is always a good time for party games as well. Not drinking games, which not to be confused with drinking games, but you know, there's all of these kind of like little boxes that you can get, like questions that you can ask people, conversation starters, you know, get a couple of people who are going to be up for it, but actually like doing an activity or playing a game together, getting the board games out, doing something like that can just be really fun. And then you're not feeling like you're kind of making forced conversation all night, you know?
Yeah, great tip. Because also you might be a little bit awkward. Like I've noticed, like just know that if you've never been to a party sober before, like you might feel awkward, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean that you like. I go to parties now and don't think about that I don't drink. It never even crosses my mind, and that social awkwardness also is a lot of like the reason why people drink. So yeah, I think games are such a good idea. What activities can you do? And just know that it's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with you if you're feeling awkward, and it doesn't mean that drinking is the solution to that or the only solution to that.
Yeah. One of my first like events that I went to, and I think it was just like a networking event. And I really like listened to people. Like I actually asked people really interesting questions, and then I listened to their response, and I came away, I learned something about them, or like learned about things that would never have been unearthed in like a normal conversation where I was just too excited for my turn to talk. And then I came away from the evening and I was like, God, I was like such a good listener, and I had such interesting questions. And I think they're going to think I was a more interesting person because of it. And I was like, I felt really proud of myself like afterwards, because I was like, well, not only did I enjoy my night, I think I was a better companion to the new people that I was meeting as well. I think I made a better impression on them.
Well, that's So funny, but like it's so
Cringy.
true. It's so true. Like, oh my God, I actually participated in a conversation rather than just waiting to. It's so yeah, that is a great tip.
It's
Yeah,
such
yeah,
a
yeah.
cringy, like, human
Yeah.
insight,
But it
but
is, yeah. But it's so like we all do it and everyone's kind of done it and probably thinks like, yeah, am I actually listening to someone or asking them or do I even care?
yeah, like I just want to talk about myself and then move on to the next person. Like,
Yeah.
just da, da, da. And actually, like, I found out some really interesting stuff about people that I would just never have unearthed otherwise. But it was the feeling that I was left with. Like, I felt like I had just a more interesting evening and experience. And it was like, yeah, a bit more fulfilled
Mm.
from the event rather than being left with a hangover and not really sure what I'd said.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is like more connection versus less shame, which is what we all
Yeah.
want.
Exactly. So let's actually just talk about maybe setting some boundaries for the holidays. So I know coming from like a family that love to drink, I will say that like my mom and dad over the last couple of years have definitely started to drink less and they're drinking more non-alcs as well. But the fact of the matter, they like to have a drink. And sometimes, like, especially when you're with family, it's really hard to set those boundaries and just say, just manage that. Have you got any advice about how we could prioritize self-care and maybe healthy boundaries during the holidays?
It's a huge topic. It's very loaded as well. I think the family system and the family structure, especially if you're trying to give up drinking, but you come from a family of heavy drinkers, or even you come from a family where your parents are alcoholics, or you have siblings that are alcoholics, you are inherently going against the grain. So you are trying to do something different, and typically it disrupts the family system and the family structure, especially if you're a big drinking family. So like go into that knowing it and being okay with that things might take a little while. If let's say your parents or you have immediate family members that are big drinkers, what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't actually make a big deal out of it. I wouldn't say to them or prep them and say, just so you know, I'm not drinking, like, because they might view it, and I've seen this many times, like they might view it as an attack or a criticism on them, and they might be like, oh, go on, just have a drink. Like, I wouldn't necessarily arm them with anything, so I wouldn't actually declare to them like, I'm not drinking on Christmas. Like that actually might inflame the situation. But similar things apply, like always having a drink in your hand. If you have an excuse, like having an excuse ready, saying like, oh, I'm doing some sort of training, but also knowing that like it's okay if it doesn't go according to plan, and it's okay if there like, unfortunately there might be some shaming, there might be some guilt, there might be like, oh, what, you think like you're so great now that you don't drink, like your family might not be supportive. My family, it's interesting because neither of my parents are big drinkers, but yeah, but like alcoholism and addiction kind of is in my family history everywhere else, but it's not really with my parents. So my mother was like really supportive of me not drinking, but my father was just like, oh my God. My father was like, but you're always so fun. Like, why don't you just have some drinks? Like, you're always so fun and so lively. And I was kind of after a while, I'd be like, Dad, it was actually a problem. That's why I don't drink. But he was never really a big drinker, so it wasn't really part of our relationship. But if it is part of our relationship, there has to be some like sort of acknowledgement that it is disrupting the family system. It's disrupting how a family operates. There's typically backlash, and almost knowing that and expecting that. And what I would say is like, get support around that. If you are quitting drinking and you come from a family environment, like go to a 12-step support group, like talk to people, maybe see a therapist about it, like work with a coach around it who specializes in not drinking, because it can be quite, we're talking about the holidays, and I feel like I am going a bit deeper here because it is a very deep thing, but specifically around the holidays, limit your time with family. Like put a hard limit on it. Say, okay, I'm only going to spend 2 hours, like bookending it as well. calling a friend before, calling a friend after, getting support, saying, I'm not going to drink, doing whatever you can. Because when you're back into that system and that environment, especially if you lived at your parents' house for a while where a lot of drinking went down and your parents might still live at your family home, there's going to be neural pathways that are triggered that are telling you to drink. So you're back in that environment where a lot of that drinking might have happened. So knowing that it is going to be a sensitive time, I mean, holidays can just be a sensitive time for anyone that comes with sort of any family dysfunction, which is a lot of people. And so like bookending, putting a time limit, knowing that you might receive backlash and that's okay, like sticking firm to it though, like having an escape plan as well. Like you might need to like get out of there quickly. If you have a partner, you might say like, oh, we're doing something at my partner's house, you know, with his or her family, or their family, whatever it is, but having a plan for it.
Yeah, for sure. I think the plan part is the big thing. I would say that the whole holiday season is hectic. So I don't know about you, like when I used to drink, it would literally kind of probably start from like mid-November, you know, the holiday parties, like the going out, like you're going out and socializing significantly more than you normally would. When I was living in England, you would have the change in the weather, so it would get cold. You know, you're cramming everything at work for the end of the year. So like, there's always that like pressure with work to close the year. And by the time actually Christmas Day would come, I would be like absolutely broken. And it would just be burnout almost, you know, and then I'd probably spend like a few days before the new year trying to kind of recover, but then new year would hit and you'd go into January just feeling like a shell of your former self, not feeling great at all, not feeling kind of like ready for the new year. Are there any kind of practical strategies for like managing stress and avoiding kind of any of that burnout that you can get over the holidays? Obviously, without turning to alcohol, because a lot of people use alcohol to unwind and relax, even though it chemically does the opposite.
It's a really great point. And I think it's like, I think for here, knowing yourself and knowing your patterns is really key. So let's say you have a tendency to overextend, where you always make plans with other people, or, I mean, not just even around alcohol, but you are always constantly making plans with people. You are always overcommitting to work. You are always like, you're the type of person, maybe you're a bit type A personality, you're a high achiever, you are like always go, 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 wanting to do things for other people. What I would say here, and I actually just did a episode about this, is that giving yourself a quota on things is a really good strategy. So the holidays can be a really hectic time. So you might want to say, okay, I'm actually just going to make like one plan per day. So I'm only going to see like one person or one group of people, because you also want to give yourself some sort of downtime as well. So like to prevent really that burnout, whether that's, you know, fatigue from the year, whether that's like social fatigue as well. Are you more introverted? Are you more extroverted? Do you need more downtime than other people? Like I need a lot of downtime. That's just my personality. I'm like giving a lot in work, giving a lot to my clients. I have a podcast. Like there's a lot of expelling of energy for me. I know that I need a lot of downtime. So for me, for example, I looked at this holiday, and typically I make a lot of plans with people. I've decided that a lot of my days, like I'm not making plans. Like I'm like doing puzzles, I'm doing my reflection, I'm going to the beach, I'm being with my partner, I'm walking my dog, but I am very purposefully like spending that 2 weeks that I've scheduled off of work. I'm like spending that intentionally. I'm only going to see family on these days. I might do something with friends on New Year's or whatever my partner wants to do, but I want a lot of blank space. So I think going into the holidays and going into this period and actually saying to yourself, like, what is it that you need? Not what is it that everyone else needs or that I quote unquote should be doing, but what is it that I really want to do? And try to honor that as much as possible. And if you say, typically when I ask people what it is they need when I'm coaching them, they'll say I need rest. They'll just say I'm really tired. And thinking, okay, what is a way that you can allow yourself to rest? Because also if you are like a hyper productive person, rest can be very uncomfortable. So it might be something like I take a walk, or I go to the gym, you know, when I get up in the morning, or I maybe see a friend, or I have a coffee. And then from like 12 p.m. onward, I can watch a movie or do a puzzle or go to the beach or read a book or whatever it is. But saying like, if you have kind of a more hyper productive disposition, then setting yourself up for, okay, I can do something in the morning and then I can rest for the afternoon, or like when are your energy levels highest, plan something for then, and then just take some time off. But going into it with an intention of saying, what do I actually need? And then almost designing it, like design your holiday, design the rest breaks, design the people that you meet. Also, if there are a lot of people that you want to see, it's like, who is going to give you energy? Which people drain energy from you? Like your family, you might really love them, but they might fucking drain your energy. And you might walk out of that Christmas dinner or that Boxing Day or whatever it is feeling like shit. So if you know that, then like plan around that. The next day, don't schedule things. The next day, just have an off day. Or the next day, see someone that always really cheers you up. But looking at what is it that you need the holiday season, and then planning for that accordingly.
Oh my gosh, so much like advice in there, and like so much that I think I personally needed to hear, because I am that person, you know, I thrive on being productive, and like I almost get my energy from achieving small things. You know, we spoke before the podcast about me like literally baking two loaves of bread, a tart for my mum coming. Like, you know, I've made homemade ice cream this morning, you know, all whilst like taking the dog for a 5K walk and everything else. You know, I love ticking things off my to-do list, and that's kind of I almost get energy from that. And there's definitely like a dopamine element in there as well. But you're making me kind of question already that kind of week that I've blocked, you know, the Christmas week, I've already like completely kind of filled everything. And I probably need to take a step back and go, actually, where can I reduce some of these things? My mother-in-law is also coming to visit for the week. And that, the dynamics always kind of change a little bit then. But I think it's also when you have somebody in your space, like I love her dearly. She's just a wonderful, wonderful woman. But, you know, when you have someone in space, it disrupts your energy. You know, my kids are 3 and 5. I don't just get that time to go and sit on the sofa and just watch a Christmas movie, which is probably all I actually want to do. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to try and see where I can block a little bit of time maybe for myself.
Yeah, I'm curious, like if looking at that week and if you were honest with yourself, what is it that you actually need?
To go to a desert island and live on my own with a big pile of books. That sounds amazing. Let's go to the Maldives. Yeah, not always possible when you've got a young family. Yeah. But yeah, how can I replicate that? You know, how can I go and steal a few hours by the pool, you know, with a book and maybe kind of get someone to help with childcare for a few hours. So yeah, I think it's just finding ways, right, of stealing that time during a busy period.
Yeah. And also like if there's, I think as well, it does get, I do want to point out that you have 2 small children, and that's like, it's, you know, it's not always easy. Like I have a dog and a fiance. Like I don't have children. I do coach a lot of mothers though, but it's also looking at, you know, am I the type of person that doesn't actually express what I need? If you have small children and you have a partner or you have a co-parent, or some like family that's there for you, when was the last time that you were like, I actually need 3 hours for me to go read my Sarah J. Maas ACOTAR series? Like that's really what I need. I need you to take these small humans and get them away from me. And it's like because I see that a lot with, especially with mothers, sometimes with fathers too, but men are typically, I don't know, I don't see this as much with men, and this isn't really a conversation about that. That's kind of a whole other podcast. But if you really need that, then how can you ask for that help? Who can you ask? If you can afford childcare for a day, and maybe it's like, I actually need childcare 2 to 3 days out of those days, even though it's the holidays, because I need time to decompress and not work for 6 hours. And like that's kind of my vacation. And like, okay, how can I make this happen? Because sometimes there are levers we can pull. And I will ask my clients, especially my mother, like my female clients with small children, is like, okay, when did you ask for help? How can you ask for help this week? Like, who can help you? Like, let's actually make a list right now of how we can make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think I've already kind of been thinking about things that I can kind of get my husband, and yeah, definitely. Such great advice, and not always just for the holidays as well, right?
Yeah.
Like all year round.
Yeah.
I actually want to talk about going into like a more purposeful new year, and get some advice from the coaching side of you, not necessarily kind of the sober side of you. So the new year is like this time for reflection and setting intentions. Like, how can we use this as a catalyst for change? You know, in my notes I'd put in your career, but I'd like to just look at this kind of holistically, maybe to start with.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question. As you know, I was just doing podcast recordings before, and I recorded an episode on like how to set intentions for the new year. And I would say the first thing to do is that if you're quite a goal-centered person, like centric person, like I would imagine, Michelle, that your audience is probably a bit type A, high achieving, likes to do things, like to be productive, health conscious, maybe questioning some things, whether with alcohol. But I know that you've done, and you're really starting to like veer into the more personal development space. So I would say that I would guess that this audience is like very personal development centric and oriented. But what I would do is I would first look back, and before we want to do like any sort of goal setting, it's actually looking back on what's really happening in the year, and like reflecting on it. How was this year? What did you achieve this year? Why, like, how did you feel about those achievements this year? How were your boundaries this year? How was your self-compassion this year? Like, how was and I always I kind of coach in 3 different buckets, and I look at career, I look at relationships, and I look at, really underneath it all is the relationship with yourself. And I think that is truly where everything starts. So if you were to do it on a scale of 1 to 10, what I would do is rate, okay, how satisfied am I in my career this year? How satisfied am I in my relationships this year? How satisfied am I in my relationship with myself? And actually put a number on it, and then start to see, okay, where did things fall down? Maybe I wasn't satisfied in my career this year. Okay, why was that? Is it because I'm working under a leader that I'm not inspired by? Is it because I know I'm in a role that actually isn't good for me anymore? Is it because I want to go into entrepreneurship, but I'm really scared? I don't know how to start doing that. I want to start a podcast. Maybe I haven't done that yet because I'm afraid of what my colleagues will think, or I'm afraid of sounding stupid. Whatever it is, like, was my relationship, on the rocks this year? Maybe it's because I have young children. We didn't prioritize any time with us. But getting into like first really looking at what were the actual factors, or was this year fucking amazing? Like, maybe you launched a podcast, maybe you got a promotion, maybe you ran a marathon, which sounds, I'm like, I can think of nothing worse. Like that's
You literally just like ticked my list. Like, starting podcast, like joined a new startup, ran a marathon.
Yeah, okay. You're like one of those marathon chicks. I'm like, cool, I'm not a marathon chick. But yeah, maybe your year was amazing. So it's like, okay, great. If you had a bomb year where they did that, really go into what were the conditions? How did I set myself up for that year? What was my support system like? What were my relationships like? Like, what made me take that leap, start that podcast? Like, how can I make that even better? So I would say if you want to start with a more purposeful 2025, then it's really looking back on what made 2024 either. Why was it great? So Michelle, it was like, great. What did you do to run that marathon? How did you feel after that marathon? What was that training like for you? Did you love the training? Did you like the big goal and achieving that big goal? Or did you like the whole process behind it? So I would say getting really introspective, because then you can almost diagnose like what was, like, I can be quite clinical sometimes of like really getting down to the root cause of what it is that went well, why did it go well, and then how do we replicate it in the future. But also there is always like a gray area of, okay, well, maybe this, Michelle, maybe you were like, I actually achieved so many great things this year. Next year, it's going to be a little bit more about consistency, refinement. Like, I want to get really good at my role. I want to grow the podcast to a certain area. Like, I don't maybe want to start all these new things this year. I want to actually like operationalize and like systematize things. I'm just throwing this out there, but like not every year needs to be like these huge things. And what I would start, I'm really passionate about this, so I'm like just getting on a rant about it, is also like knowing what season you're in. So like, are you going into a season of if you have just had a child, you are likely not going into a season of like intense career growth. Like that's just, or I don't know, maybe you could be, maybe you have full-time help and like that's another thing. That's cool if it is. But knowing that if you've been recovering from burnout, if you were just diagnosed with an illness, if a parent just died, if you've had some sort of event that's happened, or maybe you're battling depression or maybe something else, like really knowing, okay, I'm not going into a season of growth. I'm actually going into a season of slowing down. I'm going into a season of stillness. Or maybe you are about to go into a season of growth and you're like, I'm going to fucking blow it out of the water in 2025. What are the conditions I need to make? So really being honest with yourself. But sometimes what I see happen is that when people don't achieve their goals, there's usually a few different reasons. But one is they haven't identified the season that they're in. They're actually pushing against it. There's been some major things happening that they're not processing and they can't necessarily move past until they process it. And they need to either grieve or they need to really release a lot of emotions. Like they'll keep on getting stuck in some way. And then another thing is there's some sort of values conflict that they don't really realize is going on. So if you have, if your goal keeps on being like to launch a podcast and that's been your goal every year for the past 5 years and you haven't done it, there's probably something going on in there, like a parts conflict inside, like different parts of you are battling and like the one that's not doing it is winning. And you need to understand why it is that they're battling. What's that conflict? Is it afraid that, let's say a podcast, for example, if you're not doing it, sometimes it could be afraid of like bullying. It could be afraid of being ostracized. Maybe then you were bullied as a child. That behavior is then taken care of. There's always like little clues that are deeper. But yes, this is a very long answer. I get like very into it, but yeah, like reflecting and then diagnosing and then trying to replicate and understanding what season that you're in.
Wow. I think I love this. And that's slightly different advice than what you get often, where they're kind of just like, decide what you want, do a vision board, and it's kind of going down that route. I think, yeah, you're right. And understanding the season is really interesting as well. I think I'm working with kind of an energy coach at the moment. She's amazing, but she's just like, I'm still kind of battling with taking on too much. And, I keep saying to her, I want to ride this wave. And she's like, you know what, just let's reflect a little bit more. And I'm learning a lot during the process of even, just figuring out, like, looking at situations. I'm like, why is that bothering me? Why is this thing bothering me? What's the story there? What's the feeling? Where is this feeling came from originally? What's the origin of that feeling? And what do I need to forgive? And what's the mantra moving forward? Because she was like, you keep saying you want to ride this wave and you want to move forward, but if you don't go back and really relook at everything, you're not going to be able to ride that wave. You're not going to be able to take things to the next level. When you look at the patterns of self-sabotage as well, like it's understanding, are you the type of person that's always taking on more, like looking at why? I'm a big fan of, I always do internal family systems therapy. That's the modality that I love to practice in. I see an IFS practitioner. It sounds like you're doing kind of something similar with your energy coach, but it's looking at, okay, if there's a part of you that maybe always feels the need to do more, to push for more. That part, it's almost like I think of Inside Out, if anyone's seen it, and like we all have these different parts of us, whether that's like a joyous part or an angry part or a depressed part. And there, for me, I have a part. It's called the little dictator. And like the little dictator would like always push me, and it would be like, do more, take more courses, be the best. And that kind of pushed me toward burnout. And I had to do a lot of work within that part of like understanding what was its history? Where did it come from? What did it think it was protecting me from? Like, why was it behaving in this way? Because a part might think that it makes sense to behave in that way. Like that sort of sabotage, when we look at it from a more compassionate lens of, okay, this is the part that's behaving. So if we think about 2025, like, and we think about what you want to do, and like, yeah, like create a vision board, like set your goals, like, whatever. But as well, if those are goals that you haven't yet achieved, then there's a part that's going on underneath it, where there's a part that's not necessarily allowing you to achieve it. And
it was interesting for me. Like I had a huge part when I started my own business that was afraid to go on social media, that was afraid to start my own podcast. And that had to do with me being bullied in high school. And I had to switch high schools. And it was like, don't say these things because you're going to be bullied again. You're going to be ostracized. Like that part was like, I can't show up online. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want my colleagues to think this. Like it had this whole narrative going on, but it wasn't until I understood it. And it's almost like in parts where you almost like do reparenting where you're like, you're a child or a teenager. I'm the adult here. Like you don't need to do this anymore. You don't need to carry this responsibility. It's not your responsibility to look after me. You can go be a child, but I'm going to be doing these things because it's actually what's right for me. It's what's right for my career. Like I need to do these things to provide for us. But what happened in goal setting is people typically just like, they don't look at that and they just do blind, like, no, I'm going to achieve all this stuff this year without looking at, well, why is it that you haven't achieved it in the past? What's going on internally that's stopping you? Like when we talk about limiting beliefs, a lot of people don't know what that actually means. And it's like, okay, these parts of us that hold these beliefs that for some reason something bad will happen if you move toward a goal that you want. And you need to like understand that, resolve it. And then once you resolve that, typically like the behavior stops and you can really like get through and do the things that you want to do and like live in what we call, you know, I feel like what the spiritual place calls like being in alignment. Like that's what that is.
Man, Hannah, you just dropped like a couple of like bombs that have just really hit me. Just that, first of all, I definitely have a little dictator. Like, oh, there definitely is sat there in the head going, do more, you know, take on more. You'll get those more dopamine hits. You'll feel more fulfilled. And then obviously things go unfinished. And then when things go unfinished, or incomplete, they cause stress and anxiety because, you know, you can't possibly do everything. And this idea of like, you're sabotaging yourself by taking on more is fascinating. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, that's what I've been doing. And, you know, the reasons for maybe doing stuff as well, just kind of when you just said, you know, not wanting to put yourself out there. Like I'd wanted to do a podcast in forever, but it took me to do a lot of work on myself for me to like myself before I could start putting myself out there for very similar reasons for you. Like I was hurt so much in the past and then cared too much what people thought of me and just, you know, held back. I didn't want to put myself out there. But once I did that work on liking and loving myself, then you kind of care less in a weird way.
Yeah. And we're all quite complex creatures. And I think like we all have internal worlds inside of us that the behavior, once you understand why that part of you is doing, like the behavior starts to make sense. But a lot of people don't have a way of accessing how to understand the behavior. So they just then label themselves as like, I'm a procrastinator. I'm a people pleaser. I take too much. I take on too much. Or this is just how I am. Like I'm a high achiever, when it's like, no, this behavior is actually really preventing you from living a better life. But first we need to understand why it is that you're doing that. And then we can start to resolve it. So then you can launch the podcast, you can run the marathon, you can start the new business, so that you can do all these amazing things. But people try to kind of get to the end first without first understanding what it is that's preventing them from doing it.
Oh my God, I'm going to get off this episode and get my journal out and be like, oh, I feel like I've got like a free therapy session.
It's like, well, you're kind of like my ideal client. So it's, I feel like this is, it's like right in the sweet spot. Yeah. Like high achieving woman.
I think as soon as I'm finished with this energy coach, I'm going to be giving you a call in the new year. Right. Help me. So, okay, look, probably going a little bit back to my type A personality. It's really easy to get excited about goals in January. How can we maintain the momentum that we've committed to throughout the new year? Because it often drops off, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think with goal setting, I'm actually doing a goal setting workshop in December with a breathwork coach, which I'm excited about. But we're going over this concept that people always set like too aggressive of goals, and they focus on the goal, but they don't focus on the system. And this is, I mean, a lot of this is James Clear's work. Like if we look at Atomic Habits, and it's really focusing on, it actually isn't the goal, it's the system behind the goal. So for example, you with your marathon, it's like you couldn't just get up, or I don't know your athletic endurance. Maybe you did just get up one day and run a marathon, but I'm guessing there was like, whether it was working with a coach who then wrote you a program, whether it was running a few times a week or every day, or like building up to the big goal. And so what happens in goal setting is it's like, okay, I want to lose 10 pounds, or I want to write the novel, or I want to launch a podcast or start a business, or whatever the end goal is, rather than what's the system that I can implement, and what's the realistic system that I can implement on a weekly basis. And I would say if you're like, your life is like a pie, and it can be like any type of pie you want. It could be like apple, it could be like pumpkin, it could be like fucking cherry pie, whatever type of pie. And if you are, and think about each individual slice. So you have a child that takes up a big part of the pie. You have a partner, you have a job, you have a dog, you have grocery shopping, you have working out, blah, blah, blah. If you're feeling like, if I tell you, like, a big thing is like, okay, could you go sleep for a month? Like if I'm like, it does going to sleep for a month sound really good to you? And if the answer is yes, that means that your pie is too full. Like that's a really good stress test. Like you actually can't add anything to your pie until you take something away. Your pie is like bursting. There's only one pie tin. So thinking about, am I stressed? Am I exhausted? Then I would look at, okay, if I'm burnt out, like a really good goal would be doing less. How can I do less? How can I create systems and structures in 2025 where I'm taking things off my plate? And it could really be like, if you can't afford to hire help, it could really be something like, okay, how can I systematize the grocery shopping, for example? Maybe it's like every week I do a shop at Woolies. That then, I do that online. That then frees up an hour or 2 hours on the weekends, like if I do that meal prep. Or how is it that, can I do like daycare for, I keep thinking of kind of mothers. I'm coaching a lot of mothers with young children right now. So I'm kind of in that mind frame, but thinking that if these goals, like if you're exhausted, I wouldn't add on any more goals. I would actually start taking away goals, or taking away things, and like having that be a really goal. But if you do have a big goal that's saying, like, let's say you do really want to write a novel, like I'm a fiction writer on the side, I publish short stories, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, okay, that to me is really important. So what does that system and process look like? That looks like for me writing 3 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday. I write for 1 hour. I write for 3 days a week. Like that to me is how I'm going to finish my novel. So it's not necessarily the goal. It's the system behind it. But again, this is kind of coming back to, what's the season are you in? Are you actually in a season where setting an aggressive goal is going to support you? Or is it just going to be framing you for disappointment because you can't really take on anything else? And being really realistic here, like what do you have capacity for? Maybe you do have a lot of capacity for some big goals this next year, but set yourself up for success when you're setting them, rather than just always thinking new year, new big goal.
Brilliant advice. And so much that I need to take personally. I feel like this has been a really selfish episode. I hope other people take something from this, because I've taken so much from this. It's been so helpful, Hannah, honestly. I'm going to be like messaging you on the side going, let's talk more about a few of these things.
Well, thank you. It was great to be here.
Yeah. And really thank you for sharing your sobriety story and everything that you've implemented. Both are kind of linked in. I think helping people through the holiday seasons when it comes to kind of work and life and navigating sobriety during this time, I think has been really valuable as well.
Oh, thanks so much, Michelle. I really appreciate that. And hopefully everyone got something out of this. And, if you're on the sobriety journey, like I support you, reach out. It's a really hard process. And I would say like the most helpful thing is like getting support, whether that be from whatever that looks like.
Going on that sobriety journey, it's not instant. The results of that and the benefits of that aren't instant, but within a few months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, like it's going to open up more of your capacity. This is going to sound really cheesy and really corny, but like you've got the capacity to make your dreams come true and make things actually happen for yourself that I just didn't have before. And I think you start to kind of get more belief in yourself that you can do it and you are capable and you can make it happen. But even working with like a coach like Hannah, who can help kind of guide you in that journey, being able to kind of unlock more of your potential, then, you know, the sky's the limit. Remember that you have got the power to create the life that you truly desire. So by making mindful choosing, setting clear intentions and prioritizing your well-being, you can unlock your full potential and achieve great things. You can connect with Hannah on LinkedIn and check out her podcast, Big Fucking Dreams. And, you know, I'll link to everything below. So please kind of reach out to her. She's amazing. And thank you for tuning in to The Upward Spiral. And please subscribe, share with your friends and family. Take a deep breath, embrace the upward spiral. We want everyone to be on an upward spiral, not a down one. Thank you very much, Hannah. And I really hope to speak to you soon.
Thanks so much, Michelle. It was great to be here.
Thanks.